Okay.
Normally, yes. But I'm roaming.
All right.
You'll recognize her. She ran a little store in Donnie's Day in Nora and Trust. She and Van was in a choir. She stood behind her. And she stayed with us. Well, she was here today. So she stayed with us for a few days.
That is, you got your steps.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you for being here for the 9:30 Parish Hall Forum at Grace St. Luke's Church in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm Ollie Rencher, one of the clergy here, and glad to welcome you. There are several people joined here in person, and for those of you who are tuning in today, we are grateful. We have with us today Andy Nix, and before I introduce Andy, I'd like to share a description of today's conversation. Mobilizing Memphis, a faith conversation with Andy Nix. Studies show transportation is a key factor in social and economic mobility. Access to transportation determines where one can live, work, shop, and play. Social justice through transportation can make our city healthier, wealthier, and more accessible for all. I find those words which Andy, in preparing for today, shared as a way to describe his topic. And I'm grateful that here at Grace St. Luke's we can engage these sorts of conversations and hope that you will find benefit from what we discuss today. Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks and praise for the gift of this glorious new day, this opportunity to gather both in person and through technology to have a conversation about mobility, a faith conversation about justice. Be with us as we are mindful and responsive to the needs of others through what we do personally and what we do corporately. In Jesus' name, amen. Please join me in welcoming Andy Nix.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here this morning. I really appreciate it. It's wonderful to get to be together again. So yes, I am here to talk about something that's very passionate, and I'm very passionate about, and just, again, very thankful for the opportunity. I read something recently that really blew me away. And that was an article by Nadia Bolz-Weber. I don't know if anybody's heard of her or not. She is an ordained Lutheran minister from Colorado, and she's lived a real life. She's this mid-50s woman with tattoos and really, I think, incredible insights. And she describes herself as follows. She writes and speaks about personal failings, recovery, grace, faith, and really whatever the hell else she wants to. She always sits in the corner with the other weirdos. She is, number one, a great Twitter follow. If you're into that, at Sarcastic Luther, highly recommend, 5 stars. And I think she's a total rock star. And what she wrote that really hit me was an essay that was basically about overload. And she writes, the human heart and spirit were developed to be able to hold, feel, and respond to any tragedy, injustice, sorrow, or natural disaster that was happening in our village. Okay. She goes on to say that the reality of today's connected world is that we're bombarded, and it's exhausting. And it comes with a message that if you're not actively doing something about, talking about, performatively posting about X, Y, or Z, then you are an irredeemably callous, privileged bigot who is a big part of the problem. And for many, myself included, that leaves me feeling really horrible to think about, knowing that I had not done enough and could likely never do enough in the world. Pretty uplifting, huh? just what you thought you were going to get, right?
Good morning.
Good morning. And doing nothing is certainly not an option. And Nadia gives us a piece of advice and that is to ask ourselves these three questions. And that is, what is mine to do and mine not to do? What is mine to say and not to say? And lastly, and most challenging, what is mine to care about and not to care about? And in a world of such need, asking and candidly answering these three questions is not about callousness so much as it is effectiveness. It's not an issue of values so much as an issue of math. There's only so much water in each of our buckets. And to keep the metaphors going, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first in order to effectively help others. So to my mind, what this means is that it's important to apply focus and resources where they have opportunity to be effective and do great good. To help folks develop their ability to develop their ability. This morning, I'd like to share a little bit about what I have been called to treat as my own, to do something about, talk about, and care deeply about. And for those of you in the room that know me, the talk about part happens a whole lot, right? This is a topic that I speak about frequently. And that's an issue that impacts virtually every aspect of folks' lives. And that is a huge problem in many communities, but is particularly pervasive right here in our village. And I suspect you folks know where this is going, but ride with me for a minute as we get there. And that's the issue of transportation insecurity. What is transportation insecurity, you may ask? I'm so glad you asked. Let me talk to you about it. Transportation insecurity is the lack of access to reliable, affordable, efficient transportation to get where you need to go. Transportation, mobility specifically, has significant impact and dictates where one can live, work, shop, worship, learn, even play. Everything, particularly in a place like Memphis that has a very large geographic footprint and is spread out. This is particularly a problem in Memphis because it's spread out and because of the pervasive poverty that we have and the lack of efficient public transit options and our dependency on automobiles. I think we're pretty familiar with the pervasive poverty, so let's talk about the cars and why are we so dependent upon them? Well, because as I said, Memphis is big and it was designed around automobiles, for automobiles. Public transit really developed in Memphis in the decades after World War II, and it expanded largely out east, tracking the Poplar Corridor. Why did it go out to the Poplar Corridor? Because that's where some business and commerce were, and in a large part, that's where the affluent folks were moving and living, and it was a means to get the help to their homes. A couple decades later, logistics and warehousing hit the city. back in the 70s when everything all of a sudden absolutely positively had to get there overnight, and we had a lot of one particular large purple and orange company come to town and start a new industry which blossomed lots of commerce and warehouse and so whatnot, increasingly far from Poplar because land was cheap and there were efficiencies for doing operations there. Unfortunately, to date, we've not yet managed to establish Poplar corridor level public transit elsewhere in the city, like in that area. And why is that? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, it's expensive. It requires a lot of resources and infrastructure, which were not contemplated when Memphis first really started expanding. As a matter of fact, Metra has recently determined that they need an incremental $30 million a year to enhance operations. That's on top of their current budget and an every year number. There is no real dedicated funding source for Metra besides ridership revenue, which is only a fraction of their operating costs. And so the other issue, I think, and this is deeper and a bit more pervasive, and that is perspective. When you go to other communities where public transportation is really viable, that is viewed by leadership and the people there as public transit as a strategic asset for driving commerce. Whereas in our community and many near us, public transit is viewed as an entitlement program for the poor. And that has a huge impact on how resources are allocated, how decisions are made, when in the decision tree resources get allocated. And I would submit that until we make a shift towards the strategic recognition, and that's happening. It's happening. It's a long line in the water, though. So we're a car community, and what does that mean for folks? Well, that means if you don't have a car, you are stuck. You don't have the same opportunities, stability, or luxuries like time and mobility that those that have cars do have. You face significant challenges just getting to work, right? And to kind of crystallize that for you, I'd like to take you through an example. Let's talk about Melvin. Melvin is a real person who is in our program. It's not his name. And Melvin lives in Binghamton, right in the center of the city, right? And works for Amazon distribution. He could work for any of the number of fantastic, wonderful Fortune 100 companies. FedEx, AutoZone, Amazon, Nike, but he works for Amazon in South Memphis. And he's got a 12-mile commute, okay? So let's walk through what his options for tackling that commute are, right? First, via car, which is the most obvious and what Memphis is really designed for. And that would take him about 20 to 30 minutes each way to get to work, depending upon traffic and what time he goes. But it comes with an average ownership cost, and these are AAA numbers, of $12,000 a year. The average cost of ownership for an automobile in Memphis is $1,000 a month. That's to own and operate it legally. Melvin is Melvin is a value purchaser, right? So let's say that he spends half of that on a car, which is still $500 a month or $20 a day. That really adds up. So he's got that option. Next option, doesn't own a car, is an Uber or Lyft rideshare type, which would take just a little bit longer, maybe 30, 40 minutes, because you have to wait, particularly if you're waiting for a cheaper fare. And that comes at a cost of $30 to $50 a day, which is more than owning a car. The last real regular, dependable option that he's got is public transit. And public transit costs Melvin between $2 and $4 a day to get to work, depending upon how proactively he purchases his tickets, which is far more reasonable. However, the opportunity costs of taking public transit are very, very steep. And I'd like to just walk you through this real example of what that commute looks like for Melvin, who lives in Binghamton, works in South Memphis, 12 miles, right? Well, to start, he has an 0.8 of a mile walk to get to the right bus stop, all right? Which takes about 15 minutes. There he's gonna catch the number 52 bus, which he'll ride for about 30 minutes through 12 stops, and then walk or run, depending on how efficiently those stops have been made, to catch the number 8 bus, which he'll ride for 30 minutes through 40 stops, okay? To get to the American Way Transit Center, which is delightful. And then he will catch the number 7 bus and ride that for an hour, right? Through 30 stops to get to the one that's closest to where he works. And then he's got to walk a half a mile to get there. And that's just getting to work. And this is the best public transit option for him. This is how the system tells him to use the system. And we're talking about it taking more than 2 hours each way. And that's best case, because there are other options that are longer, right? Melvin works in the warehouse district, so he's got that, he's got to invest that time to get to and from work. But it's actually more complicated than that, because I don't know how many of you are familiar with warehousing and the shifts and the way that works, but let me break that down for you real quick. Basically, there are usually 3 shifts. There's a sunrise shift, a twilight shift, and a midnight or overnight shift. The sunrise shift starts at dawn and runs until mid-afternoon. Public transit is an option for Melvin in that scenario to get home. He has to get there some other way before dawn. The twilight shift starts mid-afternoon and goes until midnight. Melvin can ride the bus those 2 hours to get to work, but then he's there after midnight and has to figure out how to get home, okay? And if he works the overnight shift, he's really just SOL or straight out of luck in terms of public transit, because there's not a viable option to get him there or to get him home in any sort of reasonable time. So he's basically looking at spending 40 hours a month for half of his transit needs to get to work. If he's lucky enough to work a split shift, and one where he can take transit both ways, then his prize for that is 80 hours a month. For those of you scoring at home, that's 40 days and nights a year that he spends navigating that to get to work so he can provide for his family. So that makes car ownership pretty attractive, right? But breaking that down, if Melvin in his warehouse job makes minimum wage, he's looking at spending 40 to 80% of his take-home pay on transportation. Dave Ramsey and other financial gurus will tell you 15%. You really shouldn't spend more than 15% on public transportation in order to have a balanced family budget and be fiscally strong. So Melvin's underwater. Now, these days, employers are moving, thankfully, closer and closer to paying living wages. That hopefully is going to continue, particularly in this wacky labor market. And so let's say he makes $15 an hour, right, which is a living wage for a single individual. Then you're still talking about 20 to 40% of his take-home pay going to transportation, and he's still underwater. So what are the options for as a community to address this? The first would be MATA enhancements, and we mentioned that earlier. That's incremental $30 million a year. There are some really smart folks that are working on this. Hopefully they're going to make great great progress and great strides. I submit that that's going to take time, and that there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of folks in our large village like Melvin that need a better solution. Increased wages, that's happening. It's happening slowly. That's going to make things better. We'll further submit that over time, that other prices are going to creep up as those creep up, and we might find ourselves in a similar situation. Lastly, is thinking creatively and looking at multimodal, other options, other transportation options, other more cost-efficient, cost-effective options. And that's where my focus and my team's focus really is. The birds and the lines and the spins and those things, the razors that people stand on, those they call them scooters. It's a scooter. But those are great, and they have really proliferated throughout Memphis and many other cities. There are some issues associated with them, but the 110 plus bike lanes that have popped up in Memphis are really helpful for that, because it gives them a place to be. It raises awareness for multimodal among everybody on the road. All boats rise there. That's fantastic, and see that as a great thing, along with Explore Bike Share, and the Ojos, and the bikes, and they're putting electric bikes out there now, and all of those things are fantastic. But those are short distance solutions. Those are what's called in the industry micro transit options. They are first mile, last mile. They're outstanding. Getting one from Overton Square to Cooper Young, or from North Main to South Main, right? They could potentially help Melvin getting from his house to that first bus stop, or from the last bus stop to work. They still got the 2 hours in between, right? And that's it, if the trains run on time. So where the real issue and the real success, the real effective piece of this is with what my team has started referring to as Metra Transit, which is transportation within the metropolitan area. Think 1 to 50 miles from 38126 over by FedEx Forum out to FedEx Tech in Collierville, from Millington to downtown, from Fraser to Nike in South Memphis, those kinds of distances. And that's where MyCityRides shines, right? How am I doing on time? I'll have another hour?
Another 2 hours.
Okay, great. Because now I'm going to talk to you about MyCityRides, which is, I believe, a very big part of the solution for Metro Transit. MyCityRides is a nonprofit like no other anywhere else in the country. We work to provide immediate, reliable, affordable solution for transportation to individuals. Our program trains, equips, and supports people through a 36-month purchase of one of these vehicles. And these vehicles are made for Metro Transit, all right? The MyCityRides program starts by training folks how to operate one of these, helping them get their license to legally do that, procuring insurance for them so they can operate it legally, right? Getting it tagged so that that's ready. So the bike and the individual are street legal, right? We equip them with safety gear, helmet, jacket, gloves, everything they need, as well as the bike, for $90 a month, which is the same price as riding the bus. But this is an ownership model. So they have the vehicle 24/7 to help them get where they work, where they learn, where they play, where they worship, where they seek health care. Everything helps them achieve all of those things and in an economical and environmentally friendly manner, all right? So let me tell you a little bit about this vehicle. It's 169 cc combustion engine currently, which means it'll go about 60 miles an hour, right? It moves with the flow of traffic. So it is a very realistic option for somebody to take from Binghamton to Amazon, from Fraser to Nike, from 38126 FedEx Forum area to Collierville. Works. It works for that. Gets 89 miles to the gallon, which means you fill it up with gas, got a little bit less than a 2-gallon tank, fill it up with gas on Sunday evening for less than $5, and Melvin can go back and forth to work all week long and to the grocery store and other errands without having to put any more gas in it. And that's his total expense. And he's gotten that time back because this, as it moves with the flow of traffic, gets him there in the same time as an automobile. Maybe 5 minutes longer, but a whole lot more efficient. And then he's got it for other needs in his life. One thing that we think about is, in that scenario, how many more family dinners, how much more often is Melvin or someone like him able to be there to help with homework, or to go to a ball game, to see their kids play, or know if they're at work and something happens to their child at school, they can get there quickly. This quality of life enhancement really helps to break the cycle of poverty. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah. So not only does it do all of that, but it's fun. Okay? While it's not a solution for everybody, this is not a silver bullet solution. Transportation's complicated. It's going to take a lot of arrows in that quiver, right? But this is a viable option for folks across the broad spectrum of the community. We are really finding that it's working. So it sounds pretty cool. Yeah. How's it doing? What does it look like? Well, we've been doing this for a little over 3 years now. We put about 350 folks out on the road during the time of COVID, which has been a challenge. Those folks over the last 3 years have collectively ridden their bikes 700,000 miles in the city, going to and from work, right? We have an 80 to 85% success rate for keeping people on their bikes throughout the tenure of the program. We are graduating our first class of flyers this year. Give them the title, they own it. And because we do maintenance on these throughout the 3-year period, they are in great operating order, even after 20,000 miles. We had a flyer graduate the other day that had 18,000 miles on their bike. And this is a grown individual, 6'4", easily 350, who rode his scooter 18,000 miles, and it's in great shape. He has an asset to take with him after being in the program, and he's paid for it, right? Which is fantastic. So we have recently made the strategic decision that it's time to expand and to scale. We have proven the concept and now purchased a campus on Summer Avenue, right there near Melvin, in the center of the city, the old Al's Honda location, which is kind of iconic in the motorcycle community. It's kind of cool. And what that facility will allow us to go from serving hundreds of people in the community to serving thousands of folks at location 1, right? This program is scalable, replicable, and is only going to get greener as we move towards electric vehicles, and we're already looking at doing that. That's pretty effective. So I wanted to be sure and leave some time for questions to talk about the program, let folks come up and kick the tires, sit on it, and kind of experience it, because it can tell the story far better than I can. But before I do that, I would be sorely remiss without recognizing Dan Conway and thanking him. He's the one that connected me with the concept, and has been with us every step of the way. We would not be where we are without his support, as well as Michael Rowland. He's been in there turning wrenches and doing what Michael does. And Donnie has been helpful. There's so many people have helped. I just wanted to say thank you for that. Now, anybody have any questions?
Can you carry a passenger?
Yes, you can. You carry a passenger? As a matter of fact, yes, you can. Even if you're a guy like me. These will carry up to about 500 pounds. They're designed to carry two folks. They have those pegs for the passenger. The law in Tennessee states that a passenger has to be tall enough to sit flat on the bike with their feet resting on the foot peg. So there's not an age requirement, it's a height thing. It's usually about 7 or so. We strongly encourage people in the program not to ride somebody on the back until they have significant experience.
Note the swell pillow on the.
Yes. And as part of the program, we include what we call Scooter School, which is a 5 to 6 hour program led by off-duty MPD officers and state troopers who are from the academy, motorcycle racers, guys and ladies that really know what they're doing, very comfortable instructing and on bikes. And they help people first in the classroom and then on the range, learning how to operate these. And if somebody needs to come back for additional training, they're more than welcome to do that, and we can help them get ready to carry passengers. And we have had, that's one thing that's fantastic about the program. I mentioned earlier that this is for a broad spectrum of folks across the community. We've had single mothers of 3 who have participated in the program, ridden their kid to school on these, and that's the one that comes to mind is Tony, who is just an absolute stud. She ended up, she was first looking at the program because she worked for a temporary service and was trying to tackle transportation insecurity for the people she was trying to replace. And then that business folded. So she found herself out of work and ended up participating in the program, dropped her car, was able to keep things together, and even start saving for a home for her kids. So I thought I saw another hand.
Andy, the individual stories, awesome, love it. I also know there is a bigger scale where you're trying to attract some businesses to help their employees.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely, thank you for the question. How are we working with businesses? How does that work? Well, MyCityRides partners with employers. Our primary mission is to help people get to work, right? And one of the ways that we do that is we partner with employers who are willing and able to let their employees participate through payroll deduction. It's really easy. Nobody has to think about it. My team doesn't have to go chase payments. The participant does not have to think about that money. The employer gets the benefit of knowing they have employees with reliable transportation options available to them. And it is an extra bond between the employer and the employee. the employer can offer this as a benefit, which can be truly transformational for not just an individual, but for families, right? And do that through a benefit that is essentially budget neutral to them. It doesn't cost them anything, and they're not assuming additional liability when they sign up with us. That's part of what we do as our function. We are now beginning to partner with employers who not only let their folks participate through payroll deduction, but who are matching their contributions in the program as a form of retention bonus, right? So if somebody joins the program and they're with us and the employer for 12 months, then they get a reimbursement check from the employer back for a portion of their investment in the vehicle. Steve.
Hey, two quick questions. How many miles do these things typically last? And have you experienced supplier disruptions over the past year and a half?
Fantastic questions. Okay, number one, how many miles do these get? Or how many miles can one put on these? The honest answer to that is I don't know, but well north of 5 digits. I've got folks that have put 20,000 miles on these, and the bikes are still rolling strong with no indication that that they would not go another 20, 40 plus thousand miles. Scooters, motor scooters like this one, were first developed after World War II in Italy as an inexpensive means to get folks to work, and primarily women, actually, because a lot of the men, So these were originally designed for a broad spectrum of use, and many of those early day scooters are still in operation now. Real key is taking care of it, particularly at the beginning. And since we do the maintenance throughout the 3-year program, we know that these are kept in good operating order, and we're able to do that. That's included as part of the program. So there's that. Then the other question you had asked was about supply chain and what's that been like in the time of pandemic. And it's been a dynamic environment. It's been challenging. We were very, very fortunate back at the beginning of 2020 in January. I and my team recognized that it was probably going to get pretty weird globally, and were able to essentially corner the market on these and bought all of them in the country and all of them that were en route. So we've got now about 120 warehouse, brand new ones, ready to roll out. And we've worked to solidify supply chains, and believe it or not, we're the biggest dealer of these in the country and have been for the last 3 years, which I think speaks largely to the size of the domestic scooter market as much as how quickly we're growing. But we're a player in that now, and that's getting recognized by other distributors, which is fantastic because it gives us a little bit of leverage to continue to purchase these at a value price.
Accidents, how many? Accidents, how many?
Accidents. Okay. We have put, as I mentioned, about 350 folks out on the road. They've collectively ridden 700,000 miles, right? There have been some bumps, for sure. Overall, we have been very, very pleased with how our flyers have been received out there on the roads and how they have performed, right? And I think part of that goes to the multimodal and the awareness going up, as well as the fact that these move with the flow of traffic. And while they're street legal on all roads, we strongly recommend that folks do not take them on the interstate, which is where the vast majority of motorcycle accidents happen. There's not specific data on scooters because it's such a small market, but we have been very pleased with how we've been received. And also, it's important to note that Memphis is a pretty dangerous place to be a pedestrian. You know, I don't know how many of you guys have walked in the warehouse district, but it is unpleasant without sidewalks or proper lighting. The city is designed for cars, even where there are sidewalks. The deference and preference is for folks in an automobile, and if you see a person in the street, that's annoying, right? The streets are for cars. It's kind of the going in prospect. And in Memphis is actually one of the deadliest, if not the deadliest, major metropolitan area for pedestrians. Anybody know how many pedestrians were killed in Memphis last year? 62. You know how many were killed in San Francisco? About 24.
Have there been any accidents, you know that?
Yes, there have been accidents, there have been bumps along the way. Yes, there have been, but we have been overall very pleased.
Tell them about the GPS tracking system and the information, because it's data driven.
Sure, absolutely. When we started doing this 3 years ago, we recognized that we were doing something that nobody had done before, and that there was a tremendous amount that we just didn't know. And so we built the infrastructures and the systems to be able to track data so that we can use that to make effective decisions. As part of that, we put a GPS device on all of the bikes, which allows us to track fleet utilization and lets me share with you things like the fleet's ridden over 700,000 miles. We can tell you how many times they've been used to get folks to and from work. Those kinds of things. It's also proven to be very effective for recovery. Another question that people ask a lot, Memphis, property crime. These things get stolen. What's the aftermarket market like? What's the deal there? They do occasionally get stolen. In our tenure, we have had about 24 go missing. We've got them all back, but one, because of a GPS system on it, and largely my fleet director, who was a godsend, Jason Williford, former MPD detective, officer of the year, organized crime unit, total stud, right? When a bike goes missing, we get an alert. If somebody throws it in the back of a truck and drives, if the bike starts moving without the engine on, we get an alert. And we can call Melvin and say, hey, Melvin, are you moving your bike? Is it supposed to be in Fraser? No? Okay. We think it's stolen. You should check and call a police report. Calls the police, gets a report number, gives that number to us. We work with law enforcement. Law enforcement knows us. They know that we're pretty good at what we do. Jason's responsible for managing that relationship. And we go to the site where it is, lay eyes on it if we can, or at least as near as we can to see where it is, let law enforcement know. They show up, recover the vehicle, turn it over to us. Then we're able to give that back to the participant. In the case that they weren't in the program and it got stolen, wouldn't have GPS on it, and in the unlikely event that it got recovered or found, it would get impounded immediately, and that's a $150 fee to get it out. And then $30 a day after that. So, and they avoid that with the program. And?
Are there any requirements for people to be able to, I mean, like, do they have to have a low income or anything like that in order to qualify for the program?
Right. Excellent question. We have kept the requirements to a minimum to particularly as we were in the concept proving phase. Basically, you've got to be 18 or older. We really kind of prefer 20 or older, maturity, that kind of thing. 20-year-olds still have a lot of ground to go, I know. But they've got to be of age to sign a contract. They've got to be insurable, which doesn't mean a perfect driving record, but means reasonable. They've got to be employed, okay? And that's it, right? What that means is we have a broad spectrum of riderships, folks from across the community, all right? We really mirror the city from a demographic, from a racial demographic, age. We actually skew a little bit older than you might think. Our largest age cohort, people in their 40s and 50s. And as far as the economics of the participants, we have need-based riders and choice-based riders, okay? And the demarcation therein is a living wage. Anybody that's making less than a living wage is a need-based rider. Anybody that's making more is a choice-based ridership. And the further they are to the polls, the more so. Right now, our breakout is about 65% need, 35% choice. We found that that's a pretty good sweet spot, right? Because if you think about, if you sort of think about the portfolio of the program and the individuals participating, as laying a bet down on, we're laying a $5,000 bet on everybody that is joining the program. That split really helps from a risk pooling perspective, and we think is pretty good. Number two, that allowed us to grow and to do that in a way that is insulated from people pigeonholing the program or the vehicles as, scooters, that's a vehicle for poor people. No, it's bigger than that. It is, it's a better solution for everybody. This is how the world gets to work. If you go anywhere else, Europe, Africa, Asia, South America, Central America, you're gonna see more bikes than cars. Why not here? Culture. This is a big culture shaping, and having that broad spectrum really helps with that. So we will be, as we are moving and growing and scaling, shifting that structure so that we have subsidizers and subsidizees, but new program, complex, complicated. We didn't want people to feel like we were bait and switching, and we wanted to offer something nice for everybody. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just go ahead.
I'm sorry. And I was going to say, if anybody is interested in learning more or seeing more, I would love to give you a tour of either our current shop in the Crosstown area, right there in the shadow of the concourse, or of our new campus currently under construction on Summer. We'd love for you to learn more about it, be ambassadors for the program, and thank you for your time and attention.
And I would just add, I've had the privilege of Andy taking me on a tour, and it's outstanding to learn from start to finish how this works and to know what a gift it is to the community. So thank you. Thank you for what you do. And friends, thank you again for being here today. For those of you who joined us online, we hope that you will tune in, worship at 10:30, and other things that are part of life at Grace St. Luke's. And on our webpage, you can find information under Discover about different programs that are taking place on Sundays and throughout the week. Have a great morning.